Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I want to tell you about 20 hidden gem horror movies you can watch across all the major streaming services. So in this video, instead of sticking with one service like Netflix, I'm actually going to give you a few hidden gems across HBO, STARZ, Showtime, Netflix, Prime, Hulu, and even Shudder. Now starting with STARZ, I've got a really great one, possibly one of the best ones on this list, and that's Attack the Block. Now this is a fairly small movie, but that got a lot of buzz when it came out. So much buzz that the lead actor in this, John Boyega, got noticed, got picked up for Star Wars. I'm assuming because of this movie, because it was the only thing he was really known for at the time. But aliens attack what is basically the projects in England, and you get sort of this like criminal element at the beginning, and then these somewhat like criminals end up having to defend the block. And the practical effects with the aliens is really cool. It's not really what you would expect. There's a lot of action. To me, this one's really similar to movies like Shaun of the Dead, mainly because it's got the British sense of humor, it's got action, there's some violence. This one is surprisingly good. If it sounds like you, definitely check it out. It's worth. This is not sponsored by STARZ or any of these other streaming services because I've got them all on here, but it's worth maybe getting a free trial to STARZ just to watch this one movie. The Orphanage is also on STARZ right now. This one is foreign language, but it's actually produced by Guillermo del Toro, and it has a very similar vibe to some of my favorite del Toro movies, movies like The Devil's Backbone. This movie feels very, very similar to it. In fact, the director of this movie went on to do The Impossible, which is a really incredible movie, not a horror, and then has gone on to do the latest Jurassic Park movies, which, whether you love or hate those, I will tell you, as a horror movie goes, The Orphanage is near perfect. And then STARZ, really, I wanted to lead with it because these movies are all so strong, but Thirst is another foreign language. I don't have many on this list, don't worry, but another foreign language movie from South Korea that is really intense. It's about a vampire, and it's very different from any other vampire movie I've seen. This one really stuck with me for a couple of reasons. One, the story is really, really compelling. It's about a reluctant vampire, but then on top of that, some of the imagery in this is really incredible. One of the characters tries to simulate daylight. They miss it so much that they paint this entire apartment white and just cover it with fluorescent lights, and it's just constantly bright in there. When you introduce blood into a crazy looking set like that, it gets really wild. So this is a beautiful movie, a dark movie, just a really great gem that I know a lot of people have missed out on. If you do not watch movies with subtitles, this would possibly be the one and only I would strongly, strongly urge you to pursue. And then let's go ahead and get HBO out of the way. It's got the weakest recommendations on this list, to be honest. Now, there are better horror movies to be had on HBO, but these are hidden gems. So I'm going to start off with two Eli Roth movies, and that is Knock Knock, which actually stars Keanu Reeves, and The Green Inferno. Now, both of these movies got panned critically, and they're not that great. The reason they're on this list, though, is because they are Eli Roth, there is something a little special about them. There's something kind of unique about Eli Roth's storytelling that I've never been able to put my finger on it, but I'm not the only one. He's been endorsed by Quentin Tarantino more than once. He starred in a Quentin Tarantino movie, and he sort of is reinventing the grindhouse movies. These movies don't quite feel like one, but at the same time, they feel like something you might only be able to catch on a special screening at a movie theater, and that they would be enjoyable if you watched them with a big audience. However, watching them at home alone, they're lackluster. So I think these are really reserved for intense fans of the genre that want to squeeze every last drop of juice they can out of it. There's something to be had in these movies that you can't get in other horror movies. For your casual viewer, that's something you can live without it. Now, Phantoms is a pretty cool little horror movie that stars Ben Affleck. It might be the only horror movie he's in, and it's got an interesting, I can't say too much about this one, but it's about strange happenings in this town. Scientists begin to investigate, and things get weirder and weirder. Now, there's another movie currently on HBO called Mimic that Guillermo del Toro did direct, and I do love that movie. I do recommend it, but it's hardly a hidden gem. It's got a cult following, Phantoms would definitely appeal to anyone who liked Mimic. The movie Contracted is currently on Showtime, and it has a special relationship with Flick Connection. The star of Contracted has actually appeared on the podcast. Najara, she was a fantastic guest. I look forward to having her on again. But she stars in this, and this is a really interesting take on the start of an infection. I don't want to say too much more than that. It's got hints of movies like Cabin Fever. It's got a potentially like a zombie-esque element to it. Again, I won't say more than that, but she is really great as a lead, which is important because she's on screen in almost every single shot. But she does a great job, and this is a very, very small movie, but it too has a cult following, so much so that they have a sequel that happens to be on a different streaming service, but don't worry, I'm going to mention that by the end of this video. Now, with a title like Dude Bro Party Massacre 3, you kind of have to know what you're getting into with a movie like this. However, it's a very fun movie. It's a very bloody movie. The movie looks like garbage. And it basically is, but what's so great about it, and is always great about a movie, is when it's self-aware. And this could not be more self-aware. It was made with the intention of being this ridiculous movie, which is why it's given this ridiculous title, despite the fact that there is no Dude Bro Massacre Party 1 or 2. I know I didn't get that order right on that title, and I apologize. But if you like the campy, funny, crazy type of horror movie, this is an absolute gem. And then a classic B movie, one of the only like real classics on this list, is Q, The Winged Serpent. Now, I did talk about this one fairly recently on the podcast. Yes, there is a Flick Connection podcast. There's a link to that in the description. Go over there, subscribe, hit the bell. It's a completely separate channel. But Q, The Winged Serpent is a really wild movie. It takes place in New York. A lot of it takes place in the Chrysler Building, because in the top of the Chrysler Building lives what we'll call a dragon. And you do see the dragon in the movie. You do see the dragon drag women away from a rooftop pool. You do see blood drip on the citizens of New York from the sky above. There's a jewel heist. There's murder. There's mobsters. There's all kinds of crazy stuff crammed into this movie. It's surprisingly good. David Carradine is in it. It was written in like 6 days, shot in 2 weeks. They added the monster in afterwards. It's just got a really fascinating backstory as well, and just ultimately ends up being this really kind of cool, classic-ish type of movie. I say classic-ish because a lot of people still don't know about it and haven't seen it. By the way, Q, The Winged Serpent is also on Prime. Before getting to my Prime and Netflix recommendations, if you like this type of content, definitely click that subscribe button and be sure to click the little bell icon, because YouTube is likely to not notify you otherwise. Alright, so on Amazon Prime, I've got 3 recommendations, basically 4, because Q, The Winged Serpent is also over there. But Wolfcop is another funny one. If the title doesn't give it away, I'll explain further. But the thing that I liked about Wolfcop is it's a werewolf movie. It's not just a comedy. It's a decent, low-budget werewolf movie that includes a werewolf sex scene. You got kind of like the hard liquor drinking sheriff that, you know, doesn't take shit from anybody. You kind of get that sort of fun element from it that could have easily just been overlooked. They could have just written him as any kind of plain character. But the characters are interesting in this. And it is a silly movie. Do not watch this with the plans of being enlightened. But if you're maybe a little bit inebriated, if you're old enough to do that sort of thing, and you want to watch this as like a midnight movie, it is a great one. Another great midnight movie that is better than Wolfcop by far is Deathgasm. If that name doesn't get you, it's about some metalheads in New Zealand. So it's got a New Zealand sense of humor, which I personally really love. If you love things like What We Do in the Shadows, this has got some of that humor. However, it is edgier. There's a dildo fight. There's a lot of blood, demons, Satanism, a lot of crazy stuff crammed into this one, along with this really sort of vibrant sense of humor. I really, really enjoyed this one. Just another really fantastic midnight movie from this list. And then possibly one of the darkest ones on this list is Isolation. Now, I have listed this one recently. If you watch all my videos, this is maybe the only repeat on the list. But Isolation takes place on a farm, has to do with sort of like, not animal science. I don't want to say too much, but it is very dark, very grim, gory at times. To me, felt almost like an R-rated episode of The X-Files or something like that. Something about it really reminded me of The X-Files. So fans of that type of stuff are going to dig this one. But fair warning, it's not for anyone with a weak stomach. This one is going to be stomach-turning. And not just from the horror elements. My recollection is that there's some stuff with animals before the horror stuff kicks in that's pretty foul. So again, make sure you haven't just eaten recently or anything like that before watching Isolation. Before we get to Netflix and Shudder, I've got 2 Hulu recommendations. I've also got a Hulu binge watch coming up. Be sure to check that out, along with my top 20 movies currently on Hulu. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. But POOKA is a really odd Hulu original movie about a guy who gets a job as like a mascot type character, like a marketing thing in this weird costume, and weird psychological things begin to happen that connect him to this weird costume. The movie is as weird as it sounds. It's really bizarre concept, and it's sort of delivered in a fashion that almost like assumes the viewer should think that this is okay, that this is like normal, which was kind of interesting about it. It worked for me that like there's this assumption that like, oh yeah, of course this is what would happen. It made things feel a little bit surreal, more so than they would have otherwise. And then this one's got really weird visuals. This is not one that's necessarily going to scare you. This is not one that's going to gross you out. But this is one that you might watch, like you just are itching to watch something new and weird and different, that you'll watch and go, man, I'm kind of glad I watched that one. It's kind of on that level. So it's a good recommendation, just not necessarily a strong recommendation. And then Contracted Phase 2 is on Hulu as well. So if you liked Contracted or you watch it based on my recommendation in this video, definitely watch Contracted 2. It's almost a continuation. If you're not into it, you don't want to watch it, there's no reason to watch Contracted 2 without having watched the original. Alright, now for some Netflix. Await Further Instructions is another one that I think is a good recommendation, but not a strong one. I think you need to be kind of careful whether or not you spend your time on this one. This one's weird. It's a little bit like a Black Mirror episode, but somehow darker and grosser. So fans of Black Mirror might take to this one, but in my opinion, it's not as good. It's also kind of stressful, because basically what you get is this family who gets trapped in a flat together, in I guess a townhouse together. All of a sudden, this weird material is covering all the doors. They're being given instructions that appear to maybe be from the government over the TV. And they begin to bicker and argue with each other and try to figure out what to do. So that element is not cringy, but it is stress-inducing. And so if you don't do well with those situations, you're probably not going to do well with this movie. However, if the visuals look interesting and the hook sounds interesting, definitely check this one out on Netflix. Now, 13 Sins is barely a horror movie, but I feel like I need to recommend it on this video because it will appeal to horror fans. Now, there was a movie with Dave Franco called Nerve that came out last year. A lot of people seem to like it. 13 Sins is the original. It's rated R, it's edgier, it's grittier, it's bloodier. It's the exact same concept. A guy is basically tasked with simple tasks at first, and he's given money into his bank account. And as long as he continues to complete tasks, the money grows. As soon as he fails one, all of the money is gone. So everything he's gone through before is for nothing. And like I said, it starts out tame and it gets very intense, and it's a very interesting thought experiment. I thought this one was pretty great, especially for like this small, low budget thing that I would not have heard about otherwise. Now, The Lodgers is a really overlooked movie on Netflix that's got a lot of gothic themes, some of the most beautiful cinematography I've seen in a horror movie in a really long time. So you get incredible visuals, and it is a kind of a ghost story type of a horror movie. Maybe one of the only ones on this list. So not terrifying. Meaning it's a good horror movie for scaredy cats. I think you'll get a good ride out of it. If you're really looking to be scared, this is not going to be the one. But if you love horror movies and you want to kind of spend some time in this antique kind of gothic universe, The Lodgers is pitch perfect for that. Now for my Shudder recommendations. So I really liked Mandy from 2018, and Mandy is a Shudder original. It's on the platform. I'm not recommending that because that's not really a hidden gem. The same director, Panos Cosmatos, his previous film, Beyond the Black Rainbow, is also on Shudder. This is a hidden gem. This is one a lot of people didn't know about when it came out. Now, it is not a great movie. However, for film buffs, it's a really incredible project. There's moments in this that feel like Stanley Kubrick. The soundtrack's incredible. The cinematography is a little forced and overdone at times, but it's a very interesting project to watch. I've watched it a couple times, and I really like it. This one's dark. It's different. If you just want to watch something that's dark and different and that might be a little bit mind-expanding in the sense that it's a different filmmaking style than you've probably ever seen, and the subject matter has to do with somewhat lightly with like psychedelics and things like that. Beyond the Black Rainbow is really pretty amazing, but not great. Mayhem is a Shudder original that actually stars Glenn from The Walking Dead. This is one of his first big movies after leaving the show, and it is pretty cool. So zombie movie fans will like this one. However, it's not zombies, but the movie takes place all inside an office building, and everyone sort of gets hit with this virus that causes them to not harm themselves, kind of like The Happening, but to just go nuts and start killing each other. And so you get this really crazy battle royale taking place in this office building. It's funny at times, grim at other times, and I thought it had a really good balance to it that I really appreciated. And then Grave Encounters, I think, is one of the best and most overlooked horror movies to have come out in the past 10 years. It's only on Shudder. Used to be on Netflix. I haven't seen it there in quite a while, but you follow a ghost investigation team, kind of like one of those shows. They go to an insane asylum, an abandoned one, and then it's all pretty by the book. It's kind of funny and fun, a couple of scares, and then all of a sudden, something happens, and the tone of this movie completely changes, and I loved it. Loved it so much there's a sequel that I consider to be just as good. So if you've never discovered this, it could be a good time to hop on a Shudder free trial. They'll give you, I think, at least a week. They have sponsored the show in the past. They're not sponsoring this video, but you can get, just like a week for free to maybe see a couple of these movies. But if you're a horror fan, I really do recommend Shudder. I use it, and I give you an honest recommendation on that platform. But that is it for this video. Let me know in the comments below what you plan on watching and what you're looking forward to. But I will keep making episodes like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking this one out, and you will see me on the next one. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so a number of ways. You can become a Patreon supporter like one of these fine people. There's a link to that in the description. The Patreon support is growing, and it's allowing me to do more and more with the channel. Some of you have noticed, and I appreciate that. But you can also follow the Amazon link. If you just do your Amazon shopping there, it will give a little bit of kickback to the show. So I appreciate all the support, even if it just comes in the form of likes, comments, and shares. But stay tuned, like I said, there's a Hulu binge in the near future, as well as more Netflix recommendations per usual.